Hi, welcome to our garden class again. We have Gabriele here talking about pest control. Thank you for joining us and enjoy. Thank you.
All right, Sonia, thank you for the introduction. Like she said, my name's Gabriele O'Neill. I am a volunteer UC Cooperative Extension Master Gardener. We do have an office here in Lakeport, and that office has what's called a help desk to answer your gardening questions. Anytime, any type of gardening question. It's a free service of the University of California. And the phone number, which you may want to write down for this service, is 707-263-6838. Now, we're all volunteers, so there's not a person 24/7 sitting there, but during working hours, we have a office manager or secretary there who will take your question if there's no master gardener there and send it to the next master gardener who shows up, and they will then call you back. So make sure you leave a phone number where you can actually be reached during the day. And they will call you back and help you resolve the issue. So today, one more technical thing. We are required by the university to collect email addresses of anybody who is willing to give it to us for a follow-up survey for our class, because our statewide administration likes to find out how we're doing and how people are liking our classes. So I'm just gonna get the list that you're already signing, that will make it easier, but I need to let you know that your contact information is used to distribute a link to a follow-up survey. The short survey, provides us the tools we need to grow and improve the quality of our program. We do not sell or share your contact info with anybody else. If you do not wish to receive a survey, please just let us know, so you don't have to participate. But it helps us, if you say, hey, you liked it or you didn't like it, this is why you didn't like it, or this is why you liked it, will help for future reference. So today, we're gonna talk about, there's my little sheet, about pest control in the home vegetable garden. And it's a very big subject, that is normally a 5-hour class for beginning master gardeners, and even that barely scratches the surface. There's people studying for 5 years entomology and pathology to even, get a clue about that. So what we're doing is a really simple introduction for home use of the things that are most practical that every gardener runs into, how you can basically learn to figure out problems yourself, and if you can't, I already gave you our number where you can get help. And besides our number, there's a really nifty tool, and I thought I brought business cards of that. I only have 2 left. This is one of the main websites we actually use to find out what insect or disease we're dealing with, or what abiotic problem. And I'm gonna leave those here. The website is called www.ipm, which stands for Integrated Pest Management, .ucdavis.edu. Actually now it's called ucanr.edu, but this will still get you there. And this is a website that has huge amounts of information about every potential problem you can imagine. And it's organized in many ways. It's organized alphabetically, it's organized by groups of pests, such as, sucking pests, chewing pests, pests with a spine, pests with 6 legs, and so on. So you can, work your way through finding the problem. But like I said, you have our number. If you get lost, do not hesitate to call us, and we'll help you further with that. And I'm gonna leave business cards for our office also here, so as a follow-up. Now, the kind of pest control we need in the home vegetable garden, as I'm dealing mostly with organic gardeners when I teach these classes, vegetable gardening classes, so that already excludes a lot of the material that the university talks about, right, which is meant for farmers, funny thing, I was taking a walk through my own garden in the morning just to see if I could find some pests to show you what we're actually dealing with. And actually for about a whole month or so, I couldn't find any pests in my garden other than some remaining aphids from my little aphid infestation that I had on my kale in May. So I went to that kale again to see if there was any left, and I did find a few, even though I have to say the heat that we've been having in the last few days has kind of resolved the aphid problem for the most part, because aphids cannot stand 100-degree temperatures for very long. So I only found one kale leaf that still had a sizable amount of live aphids on it. And as you can see, they're here on the underside. Now this kale is a tree kale. It's like 5 years old. It's just growing in place throughout the year and again the next year. But in the summer it loses most of its leaves. Number one, because it's too hot and it's hard to keep water on these giant kale plants. And because the aphids have kind of decimated it when it, starts getting warm in the spring, warm and moist. So I'm gonna pass this around, and you can see that most of the aphids are actually already dead. And what you see is just the dried out skin of it. And there's a few of them that are still alive. And I'm gonna actually, I have another little magnifying glass here that I'm gonna pass around with this, so you can look at it under a magnifying glass, so you can see what these things actually look like. They are soft bodies.
Over there.
Huh? You have some over here?
Kale over there.
Right. Exactly. That's the tree kale. Mine are much bigger. They're about that high. But I cut them down in the summer because I don't want to pour 100 gallons of water into this bed constantly. So I cut them down to that size, and they'll sprout out again and need a lot less water. So this was just, the reason I'm mentioning that is that there is parts of the year where you're not going to have a lot of insect problems simply because of the conditions we have here. So the insects that come out generally in the late spring when it's warm and moist, something that most insects like, right? As soon as it starts getting really hot, a lot of those just die off and you don't have to do much about it. However, then as the hot season keeps going on, we tend to get those insects that don't mind the heat, that all of a sudden feel like in their element, right? And part of it, that's another thing I found on the kale to my surprise, already the first harlequin bugs. And there's not many, and they're all in their nymphal stage right now. You can see these are very colorful orange-black bugs that have various nymphal stages where they look slightly different than the adult. The adult is very colorful, and the name harlequin bug says it's actually a beautiful bug. But it's in the stink bug group, which is a group of sucking insects. They suck the plant juices out of the plant. And this is probably the second nymphal stage, and this is probably the third nymphal stage. These two.
I've seen those before, yeah.
You've seen those before, right?
Yeah.
Those are a big nuisance for cold crops. They can decimate a kale bed or a cabbage bed in a very short time because they multiply very fast. So here we are already with, well, what do I do about it, right? You're probably thinking, And so what we're all going to be talking about today is the various things that a home gardener can do without resorting to anything toxic to us and toxic to other mammals and toxic to beneficial insects. Because number one, it's not only that we don't want to poison children and dogs and cats, we also don't want to poison beneficial insects that we actually want in our garden. So pest control is always a fine line, killing the pest we don't want, but making sure nothing gets killed that we actually want to keep there. And integrated pest management is like almost exactly the same as organic gardening, with the one difference that in integrated pest management we do sometimes resort to non-organic remedies as a last resort, but literally I hardly ever use them. This is really a last resort, and mostly for people, like if you're in a situation where you're growing for the farmer's market, and if you don't use this remedy, you will lose your entire crop, then we would use that. But for a home garden, I have to say, I hardly use anything other than soap or some of the beneficial things that, the harmless things we're going to be talking about. So for these, just as an example, since we're already at it, these harlequin bugs are in the stink bug group. There's lots of different native stink bugs and a lot of imported non-native stink bugs here now. One of the things they all have in common is they all suck plant juices. They're all sucking insects. So they don't eat anything. They suck the juice out of it. And one of the things you can see when you have a sucking insect, you look at this leaf and there's white spots on the leaf. See the white spots on that kale leaf? Light colored spots. Well, the reason they're light colored is because the insects literally suck the chlorophyll out of that spot. So whenever you have sucking insects, you'll find little light colored stippled spots on the leaf because that's where the chlorophyll is missing where they've been sucking. Whereas if you're dealing with a chewing insect, such as for instance an earwig, you don't have that. You see actually holes chewed into the leaf. That's like two important decisions to make when you see some problem with a plant and you think it's an insect. Now, oftentimes it's not even an insect. You know, when you see holes chewed in a plant, what else could it be besides an insect? Most of the pests I have in my garden are pests with a spine. They're actually not insects, okay? They're either birds, ground squirrels, gophers, you know, things in that category are actually a much bigger problem for me, and they'll bite big chunks and big holes into your stuff, right? So now when you have this type of insect, a stink bug, what do you do about it, right? There's not many sprays that will kill a stink bug. The only spray type of things that will kill a stink bug are usually the toxic ones that we don't want to use, you know? So what I do to get rid of things like that, it's one of my favorite super low-tech pest control methods. I take a bucket, I fill it full of soapy dishwater, you know, put a good amount of soap in it to destroy the water surface tension. And every morning when I'm in the garden, because I'm in the garden early in the morning to water, harvest, and do whatever I need to do, I take my little bucket of soapy water with me. So instead of bringing that to the class here, what I would have done is just take that leaf and shake these bugs into the soapy water and let them drown. Okay. That is the easiest way and most non-toxic way to deal with type of insects that are hard to kill. Now, if I would have taken an organic insect spray, such as Safer soap, I think I have something, yeah, insect killing soap. This is something, you know, benign that you can buy at every good nursery, an insecticidal soap, which you could make yourself, but you can buy it ready to go and spray. If you make it yourself, which we are actually not supposed to recommend, because people, when they make stuff themselves, often do more damage than good because they don't do it right. So for most people, it will be much better to just buy something like that. But if you do make it yourself, use a soap such as a castile soap or something like Murphy's Oil soap. And the difference between that and dish detergent is that dish detergent is not a soap. It's a detergent, meaning it is much harsher and much more penetrating. And the problem with that is that it's more likely to kill the plant you spray it on than the insect sometimes. So that's why if you do make it yourself, we recommend like a castile soap made from, you know, oil or something like that, which you can buy at every hardware store. But the simplest and best way is actually just, you know, to buy something that's specifically made for that purpose. However,
like the peppermint Dr. Bronner's or something like
yeah,
that.
there's other things out there. I wanted to bring you an example of what else is out there. Where did I put it? There's other formulations that have all kinds of other stuff in them, such as, you know, cayenne pepper extract, garlic extract, and you name it. Dr. Earth pest control killer spray. That sounds really cool, right? But it really is not much better than, you know, because the elements are always the same. Because as home gardeners who want to stay non-toxic, we do not have a lot of things we can spray that will kill an insect. Let's face it. The things we can spray that will kill an insect are only either soap-based, and what soap does is it destroys the surface tension of the water, and therefore makes, you know, the water able to get into places where it normally couldn't go, and basically drown the insect. The other thing we can spray is mixtures of cayenne pepper garlic, which are irritants to the insect, or irritants or things that they don't like, that they will get away from. The other thing we can spray is oil-based formulations, either just horticultural oil, which is actually a very finely dispersed mineral oil. And how that kills insects is it clogs up their breathing apparatus and it just basically smothers them. So it kills them mechanically rather than chemically. And that's something we do when we dormant spray fruit trees. We spray them with oil. Because in the winter, when all the leaves are gone and you just have the naked branches, there's not that many places insects can hide. There's always a few females overwintering, in the cracks of that tree. So we spray them with these horticultural oils to pretty much suffocate them. It's a mechanical way of killing them.
Is that like neem oil?
Now, neem oil is an oil that's often added to these horticultural oils for extra effect. What neem oil does and other neem products, they stop the desire of these animals to feed, from what I understand. So not only will the oil smother them, it'll also ruin their appetite, basically, right? Yeah. And cause them to stop feeding. But that takes a while before that happens. So they need to ingest it before that happens. But very often neem oil, because it's much more expensive than just mineral oil, it's added to products that are made with mineral oil. They add some neem oil to it, or they add neem oil to another soap-based product.
Okay.
Just for added
regular
effect.
Oil then.
But regular mineral oil will suffocate the breathing apparatus of insects and smother them. That's basically all our dormant spray is. The other part of the dormant spray is a fungicide, which is copper-based.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes, depending on the brand, you can combine them into one. With some brands, you cannot combine them, so you need to spray twice. But so it's actually basically a physical method of killing the insect rather than a chemical. Because the chemicals you would need to kill these stink bugs are already in the category that would kill all the beneficial insects too.
Oh.
We're talking malathion and things like that, so we don't want that. So unfortunately, most people who consider themselves organic gardeners are still always hoping for the one magical killer spray that will kill all the bad insects and leave all the good ones alive. So let me just tell you right now, that magic killer product does not exist, okay? And because that doesn't exist, you need to do a little bit of observation to find out which insect you're dealing with in order to be able to kill it with something benign. Because like I said, if we have a sucking insect, such as the really soft-bodied little aphids on that kale, you can kill those aphids with a safer soap spray. Just soap will do them. Sometimes even just a really hard spray of water will get rid of them. It's easy. But if the hard spray of water doesn't get rid of them, then some soap, because they are soft-bodied, that'll kill them. But then if you have, let's say, scales on a leaf. Do you know what scales are?
I was just going to ask about that.
They look kind of like little bumps, right? So they have this shield. So spraying soap on a shielded insect is not going to do anything. So with scales, you have to actually learn their life cycle and find out when they babies hatch. Because the babies of the scales, that are also called crawlers, they don't have that shield yet. One of the most common scales in Lake County is called Kuno scale. It's a completely spherically round, reddish-brown little bauble, and you find it on apple trees, plum trees, pyracantha. As a matter of fact, pyracantha is the main host, but it goes on many different plants, and sometimes the infestation is so bad that the whole trunk or the whole branch will be covered in these little brownish, reddish balls, right? These are all adult females, and that brownish reddish ball is the shell that will not be penetrated by a spray like that. So the only way to kill an insect like that is to either just manually squish it between your fingers, but that's a lot of work if you have a whole tree full, So the only other way to sensibly go about that is to wait for the next generation, the crawlers, when they hatch from underneath the female scale. These little Juno scale crawlers, for instance, are bright orange, so they're actually easy to see. They hatch anywhere between mid-May to end of June. So you need to observe your plant every day. And as soon as you see those little crawlers, then you can spray them with something like that and kill them, because they don't have that shell to protect them yet. So it's a timing thing, right? But any insect with a hard shell, such as those stink bugs, forget about soap, you know?
Yeah.
So you can either squish it, drop it in a bucket with soapy water. There is more hardcore insecticides that would kill those, but they would inevitably also kill insects that you don't want to kill, such as your pollinators, right? So I just had these two examples here to kind of give you a live example for what's going on in my garden right now. But that's the only real pest problem I have in my garden right now. Other than, of course, I forgot to mention, squirrels, birds, which are stealing the plums from my tree. So what do you do about that? There is bird netting, which I hate that stuff because it gets stuck in your hair, it gets stuck in the tree branches, it gets stuck on your buttons, it gets stuck in everything. So it's really hard to work with, but it will keep birds out of your tree if you manage to literally wrap the entire tree all, and you have to tie it around the trunk because they will get in from the bottom. So you cannot leave a square inch open if you want to keep the birds out. And I've had 2 cherry trees that I wrapped every year in this stuff. It took 5 hours for my husband and myself to wrap those 2 cherry trees in that stuff. Yeah,
my God.
and that was
That's
the only way
dedication.
we got cherries, you know?
Can you make like a chicken wire or something, like a cage that you just can maybe put
Of course you
together
can make a
and
cage,
just do
but
that?
if you have as many fruit trees as I have, that is like completely prohibitively expensive,
Yeah.
not to mention the amount of work.
Yeah.
So we haven't done that. I've tried it with 1 tree, but it's like, first of all, I don't want to make my entire garden look like a maximum security prison, right? Already the vegetable garden looks like a maximum security prison. I forgot, it's one of the boxes of props I forgot is the things I built to keep my beds and my barrels safe. So there is there's a wire thing, it's called hardware cloth. It looks like that except made out of wire, hard wire. And I build little cylinders. We buy that in big rolls. It's not cheap, but it'll last forever. It's galvanized. So I will make a cylinder the size of the barrel and then put a lid on, you know, a fitting lid,
Yeah.
and permanently tie that up so I have a cage that I can just put on top every barrel. I also have it for my beds. And this goes like when I sow some fresh seedlings, you know, like 3-4 inch tall lettuce seedlings or whatever, which will guaranteed be eaten by the birds if I plant them without protection. So this grid goes over it and it stays on until the plant has reached a stage where the birds are no longer interested in it. Or same for ground squirrels, you know, so it'll keep bigger critters out. So I found that in my garden, I use mechanical exclusion of pests more than any other pest control method. Because I don't have a lot of insect pests. You know, I will get aphids every late spring, but it's usually at a time where the kale needs to come out anyway. By the time a lot of things get aphids, it's usually at the time where it's time to compost them anyway, so I don't bother. And that is one of the most important parts of pest control. Don't waste your time trying to kill something if you're not going to get any more edible material out of that plant. You know, if it's unlikely that you're going to get more edible material out of that plant, then don't waste your time killing the insects on it. Get rid of the whole thing and start planting something more climate appropriate for the season, you know. So that's why I don't use a lot of this stuff. Rarely ever use it. Mostly I'll just, you know, end of May when it gets aphids, I take the whole thing out, shred it, mulch my tomatoes with it. Because the aphids don't go on the tomatoes.
No.
You know?
Yeah. Can you use that white flies?
So white flies, what I would use for white flies is, let's see, I don't have my yellow cardboard with me. I'm not as organized as I usually am. We had a fire 2 days ago, 100 feet from our house, so yeah. I was in shock yesterday and I just this morning grabbed a bunch of stuff, but so I'm missing some of my props. But for white flies, one of the best things, first, one thing you could do is just spray them with that on the underside of the leaves. But the other thing that normally works really well is it's these yellow sticky traps. All it is yellow cardboard because they go for the color yellow. White flies are attracted to yellow.
Yeah.
And these yellow cardboard pieces, they are covered with something like that. It's called tanglefoot. It's a
some
super
sticky stuff.
sticky stuff. It's like axle grease, basically. Look at this. You don't want to touch it. You will never get it. It's like
Oh, yeah.
resin, tree
Oh,
resin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So these white sticky traps, they are covered with that stuff, and everything that flies on it will stick to it and
Yeah.
stick to it. You can make them yourself with that, just by using some yellow cardboard and putting that on. But you can buy them ready-made.
Yeah.
Of course, more expensive.
Are bees attracted to those?
No, bees are not attracted to that.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Think of that.
And what you do is, you can just use chopsticks, and put that piece of cardboard. If you buy them ready-made, they'll come with a piece of wire and everything. But if you make it yourself, you can buy a huge piece of yellow cardboard, cut it in pieces, coat it with that, put it on a chopstick, and stick it right next to the plants that have the white flies. Right?
My zucchini always gets white
Yeah.
flies. at the end.
I would maybe use that in combination with knock at least the first batch down with a little bit of safer soap, But whiteflies again are a sucking insect, soft-bodied sucking insect. So they are not hard to kill, Like all those little soft-bodied tiny things are not hard to kill. But we were talking about vertebrate pests. Vertebrate pests are the ones that have a spine. Birds, squirrels, etc., etc. And of course, deer, right? So this is deer fencing. Because you don't kill deer, you just keep them out, right? So the only thing that works reliably against deer, never mind all the super remedies that you constantly see on Facebook, and from Irish spring soap to juicy fruit chewing gum to, I can't tell you how many miracle remedies I've seen that supposedly work against deer. And sometimes those work for a little while because, yes, deer don't like the smell of Irish spring.
Yeah.
But it's not going to, in the long term, keep them from raiding your garden, believe me. And the same is with juicy fruit gum.
Yeah.
Well, how much juicy fruit gum do you have to buy to keep the deer out of your garden? That could bankrupt you, yeah? So I think before you spend that kind of money, you might as well invest in a fence, right? It'll do the trick forever and ever. A 7-foot fence and no deer will ever get in your garden again. And I found that if you can't afford a 7-foot fence, even a 4-foot fence, as long as you make the fence posts much higher, so you have a 4-foot fence but with high fence posts, and then you just string wire every foot.
Oh, yeah.
That'll usually work because they don't see that this is just wire that they could theoretically slip through.
Yeah.
They just see that there's still something up here,
Okay.
But we have a 6-foot fence, and honestly, no deer has ever tried to jump that because right next to us are people without a fence. So why jump over our 6-foot fence when they can just simply walk into the garden next door, right? So they will always go for the easier target. If you happen to have the highest fence in the neighborhood, they're not going to go in your garden, even if it's not 7 feet. The one thing I found that with deer, my first fencing project was only 4 feet. But then instead of wire, I strung just regular twine every foot. And a deer accidentally broke through that once. And then they realized this is just twine. So from then on, that was it. They would just jump in there. So then we had to put wire up, right? But, mechanical exclusion, again, is the best pest control there is. It's non-toxic. It works guaranteed every time. Another way to mechanically exclude some pests is one of my favorite crops here. Oh, here, by the way, that this tanglefoot stuff can also be applied with a brush. It also comes in tubes like that.
Oh, okay.
And it can be applied with a brush on this band that you would put around the trees of a trunk. Because ants will crawl up a tree and bring their aphids with them. Ants farm aphids like we farm cows. They milk them basically. Because aphids and every other sucking insect, they exude a sugary substance from their behind, which ants love. Just like we love our dairy, right? And so what ants will do, they will go through great lengths to protect their aphids on the tree. And even if you kill all the aphids on a plant, the ants will bring them back. So when you see, the moment you see ants going up your plant, you know you will never get rid of the aphids unless you also get rid of the ants on that plant. And if it's a tree, you would put a band of that stuff,
Yeah.
crepe type of, around the trunk and brush it with tanglefoot so they get stuck on that, and then the ants can't get into the tree. And then you go about killing your aphids, then you don't have to worry about the ant bringing them right back. So that's always a double whammy. Aphids usually come with ants somewhere, you know?
I
Not
can use that
always.
around my sunflowers.
Yeah.
The sunflowers at the other garden, ants are likely to crawl
Right.
at those.
Yeah. So you always have to also deal with the ant problem. Now, if you can't remember any of that, don't worry. You go to this website. It'll have instructions about how to do that in great detail.
Okay.
ipm.ucanr.edu, and it's on there on your handout, right? If you have further questions, call the Master Gardener office. So don't think you have to remember every word I say. But I just wanted to show you. And that was another tangent I get into, talking about, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, I sort of remember. Another method of mechanical exclusion that works really well for some pests is floating row cover. Now this is used materially, it's normally shiny white, but this has already been used for a season. It looks like Halloween decoration, right?
Yes.
It's kind of like that, but it's actually fairly sturdy. And it has some holes in it. That's why I'm only using it as a prop now. But that stuff you can buy at every garden supply store, nursery. I buy it in big rolls and then share it with friends instead of, if you buy little pieces at a time, it's very expensive, you know. So if you buy a big piece and share it with 5 gardening friends, it's much, much cheaper. And that is something that I put on top of like any type of cabbage crop that gets these green caterpillars, the cabbage loopers. Do you know those? If you've grown kale or cabbage, you've seen those. It's these little green worms, caterpillars, that'll eat holes in your cabbage and kale, or any other caterpillar that will go. This stuff will keep the moths and the butterflies out that these caterpillars are the immature form of. Because these caterpillars are the babies of moths and butterflies. And if you put that stuff on top of your plants, the butterflies can't get in. So this is a great way to grow cabbage, kale, any kind of cold crop where you don't want to have to spray. The other way to deal with caterpillars is use a spray product that contains Bacillus thuringiensis. It's abbreviated as BT. And this is a bacterium that will not harm mammals or birds or you, but it will kill caterpillars. It basically gives them fatal indigestion. Yeah. But it only harms them when they eat a leaf that has that on it. So you spray it on your crop, and as soon as they eat a piece of kale that has that bacteria on it, they will stop eating shortly thereafter because, you know, they're going to die of indigestion. And I think I may have a product here that has that in it. Let me see. No. I thought I had some, but I can't find it right now. Oh, here. This is a product that has BT in it, and they are called mosquito dunks. Because mosquito larvae also get killed by this bacillus. So what you do is you throw one of those in a pond, and the bacteria, the BT bacteria, go into that pond and they kill all the mosquito larvae in there. They will not kill the fish or do any harm to anything else. They will just kill the mosquito, because the mosquito larvae are susceptible to the same bacteria as caterpillars. So the active ingredient in those is also inside of sprays where you can, you know, spray your cabbage or your kale. I don't happen to have a spray with that in it right now, unless it's in there, but I don't think so. Let me see, active ingredients, no. This is an essential oil-based spray, by the way. Dr. Earth Killer Spray is essential oil-based. So there's a lot of essential oils that will kill insects. The problem I have found with essential oil-based spray is many of these sprays kill the plant before they kill all the insects, because they often have clove oil, cinnamon oil, which are very harsh, very strong, very harsh essential oils. And if you have a plant with tender leaves, the plant will die by the time it kills your insects. So I'm not a big fan of essential oil sprays for most plants. You have to have a pretty hardy plant to survive that. But it will kill the insects. Yeah. Oh. Okay. What else do we have here that I was going to show you? One other non-toxic method to kill crawling insects, all crawling insects practically, it's called crawling insect killer. Right? But what is it really? What's the active ingredient? The active ingredient is called diatomaceous earth. It used to be called Fuller's Earth, that was the brand name, but it's just called diatomaceous earth. And what is diatomaceous earth? Diatomaceous earth looks like a white powder. It is the dried, powdered spines of one-celled algae, microalgae. They are razor sharp. We just can't see that, because if you put that under a microscope, it looks like little saw blades, like little broken up saw blades, razor sharp little saw blades. But to us it just looks like a white powder. And what that does is, insects have an exoskeleton. You know what that is? They don't have a spine inside with the soft parts on the outside. They are the other way around. They have all the soft parts on the inside and the hard parts on the outside. It's called an exoskeleton because it's outside. So they have a hard shell on the outside, and then all their soft stuff is on the inside. So this diatomaceous earth, these little razor blades, they cut into the exoskeleton and make holes in the exoskeleton. Literally, you're sawing them up. And then they dehydrate, because all the soft, squishy, wet parts on the inside will dehydrate once they have cuts from that stuff. So again, it's a mechanical way of killing insects rather than... this does not harm mammals, other than you don't want to breathe it in. But you could safely eat that stuff. It would not hurt you. You just don't want to breathe it. You don't want to get it in your lung. Yeah. It's also used in food grade version to... It's added to like grain storages. When you store grains or beans or something and you don't want any weevils to get in there, you would add some of that to it to kill insects in stored grain.
And then just rinse off.
And you can safely cook that rice or those beans. It will not harm you. The problem with that diatomaceous earth product is that once you if you overhead water your plants, as soon as that stuff gets wet, it's like having a really hard noodle, and as soon as you cook it, it's a soft noodle, you know what I mean? It's sort of like that. Yeah. So they don't do the job anymore once it gets wet. So you have to reapply it after watering. That's why it's best used if you have an irrigation system that just drips water in certain places, then you can dust that over. But if you overhead water, this is a very hard. But what I use it very successfully for is ants in the house, actually. I dust that, all around the perimeter of a room. I put it all along the edges of the counters where the ants tend to crawl. Once they crawl through that, they're going to die very soon after that. And it's completely non-toxic. It's a little dusty, it looks a little odd, but since I don't have small children, if I would have small children that crawl along the floor, I would not do that because they would breathe that in, obviously. Or even, if you have pets crawling along the floor, not a good idea, but I don't have any dogs anymore, and my cats are outside cats, so I can safely, distribute that in my house because my husband and I knows where it is, and it works like a charm for ants. So, what other tricks do we have? What I briefly brushed on. Oh yeah, some of your handout talks about prevention, and that's actually one of the big things when you want to have a non-toxic garden. Prevention is really the key. I can't tell you how important it is that you visit your plants every day, because in order not to use toxins, you need to stop infestations before they happen, basically. You know what I mean? Once you have 1 million bugs over your plants, safer soap is, not going to do the trick. So you want to catch every problem when it's just in its infancy, basically. And how do you do that? By visiting your plants every day and looking at them, So that is imperative. The gardener's footsteps are the best fertilizer, they say. And it's literally true. And what that means is, you know, the gardener's footsteps means you're actually paying attention to what's going on in your garden, and that's the key. Because if you see one of those stink bugs, that may be the first one that has come in from somewhere. And it may be a female full of eggs. If you kill that one stink bug immediately by you stepping on it, dropping it in your bucket of soapy water, or however you choose to kill it, you're saving yourself from an infestation, because within a week you'd have several hundred of them. And once you have several hundred of them, you can kiss your kale goodbye. You know, they will make short work of it.
Yeah.
So the key is prevention and nip it in the bud, basically. And to nip something in the bud is usually easy. It can be done manually. You know, if you really don't want to touch that bug, then just take a pair of clippers, clip the leaf off, and drop it in a bucket of soapy water. You don't even have to touch the bugs if you don't want to touch them. I have, you know, wooden beds just like that.
Yeah.
I will shake that on the bed and step on it. I mean, that's my preferred method of killing stink bugs. You know, that way I don't even have to touch it. I shake it on there, I step on it, or if I have my bucket in hand, I'll just drop it in the bucket. It's going to be drowned in no time, so no need to even touch it. Otherwise, if I really need to touch it, let's say I have a hornworm. Do you all know what a tomato hornworm is? That's a common pest, right? It's these giant green caterpillars on tomatoes. It's the larva of the sphinx moth. It's a giant moth. It looks like a hummingbird almost.
Wow.
You could mistake it for a hummingbird when it's flying. It's so big. But that tomato hornworm, well, you cannot shake it off the tomato. It will not let go. So you need to really pick it off. So for that, I put some garden gloves on just in case I accidentally squish it. I don't want to end up with green goo between my fingers. So I put my garden gloves on and take it off. And I used to feed it to my chickens, but now I don't have any more chickens. So now it just has to be, you know, drowned or something.
Have you ever had them to where they like flip around? They try to get you with that little horn.
Oh.
They flip.
That little horn is not going to do anything.
I know, but it's
purely
out. It's
psychological.
like, yeah.
I mean, they try to scare you away psychologically, but they are completely harmless, and you could squish them with your finger, but I don't want to. So anyway, so what I'm saying is, checking your garden and your plants every day is important. And as you can already see, most sucking insects live on the underside of the leaf. If you only look at your plants from the top, you would never notice until it's too late. So check the undersides of your leaves as you go through your plants. And you don't have to check every single leaf, but just, you know, flip over a leaf and see if there's something underneath. As we're approaching the hot season now, the main insect pest, and probably the only insect pest I have during the hot season, but reliably every year, that almost everybody has in Lake County, is mites. And they often call them spider mites. It's kind of, I find that a bit misleading, because in many publications you see that spider mites spin webs, and that's how you can recognize them. Well, I find that in Lake County it's so hot that they most of the time don't even manage to spin a visible web. So the mites are there even if you don't see any webs. And how you can recognize it, as soon as we're in triple-digit temperatures for a while, and you go and visit your plants, let's say your beans. That's a typical crop that they devastate, is beans. They love beans. So let's say you visit your bean plants and you see the leaves are stippled with all these light-colored, silvery-looking dots on the top. So what did we say before? Whenever you see light-colored dots on top of a leaf, what do we have? Sucking insects that suck the chlorophyll out of it. But you don't see any insects. Well, then you turn the leaf over and you don't see any aphids. And then you take your little magnifying glass, because mites are much smaller than aphids. And once you take your little magnifying glass, you might actually see some webbing. But to tell you the truth, a lot of the times the webbing's already dried up by the time you notice what's going on. But you can see the mites under the magnifying glass, and they're like tiny little spidery type of things. And the bad thing about mites is that by the time you notice they're there, it's usually too late to do something about it. By the time you have all that stippling going on, when you turn the leaf around, you see you have 1 million mites on the back of your leaf. And even if you kill every single mite, that leaf is toast. You know, it will die, because the chlorophyll is gone. Once the chlorophyll is gone, the leaf is not able to photosynthesize anymore. So even if you kill every single mite on it, you're not going to bring that leaf back. So the problem with mites is early detection is hard. You really need to take a close look. Once you know which crops are usually affected, then you can just go to that one crop. Let's say you've had 3 weeks of hot weather and you think mites are probably starting to, you go to your beans, you look on the underside of the leaf with one of those, and then you do something about it when you only see 1 or 2 mites. You don't wait till there's 10,000 on the underside of the leaf, right? Because by the time you notice it on top of the leaf, that leaf is toast, you know? That's the problem with it. And one way to prevent that, or at least I find I cannot totally prevent it, but I can prolong my mite-free time by at least 1 month if I overhead the water and really spray them down as often as I can, because mites hate water. They like it hot and dry, believe it or not. Unlike most other insects who like it hot and moist, mites like it hot and dry, as hot as possible and dry. So the wetter you get it, the more they're not going to feel comfortable. So I know that they always go on my beans, so I keep spraying down my beans whenever I think about it. And that kind of keeps them at bay till mid-end of August. But by that time, eventually, they will have some mites. But at least by that time, I can harvest my beans before the mites completely kill the plant. So you're basically, a lot of the time, all you can do is gain some time. You will not be able to completely eliminate most pests, you know. I mean, other than spending the entire day in your vegetable garden, right? Most people don't have the time to spend the entire day. So certain pests are going to come around at certain time of the year. It's pretty much guaranteed. But you can kind of extend the period of pest-free time by taking certain preventative measures, such as, you know, spraying your beans down. One of the preventative measures we generally like to take for almost every pest is invite beneficial insects in our garden. And that's kind of a euphemism, you know. Beneficial insects, that sounds so peaceful and sweet, right? What beneficial insects really are insects that parasitize the insects we don't like. It's like out of a horror movie. Like those little parasitic wasps. They're only like 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter big, those little wasps. But they will lay an egg into a caterpillar, and that egg hatches inside the caterpillar and will eat that caterpillar from the inside out. So these are what we call beneficial insects. They're beneficial to us, not to the caterpillar, right? So it's all relative, you know. But we call them beneficials because that sounds good, right? And they are beneficial to us, you know. So we want to encourage to have a lot of those beneficial insects in our garden to kind of prevent caterpillars from taking over.
Yeah.
By the way, while I think about it, besides the parasitic wasps, one of the best natural enemies of caterpillars are yellow jackets and birds. So as much as I hate the birds eating my greens, the birds will usually, at least during the time when they feed their young. See, birds, when they feed their young, they need protein. That's when they go for caterpillars. When they don't have any young, they like carbs. They go for my lettuce or my kale, right? Or whatever else I plant. But during the time that birds raise their young, which is in March, April, that's when they eat caterpillars. So they will eat those green worms off of you. But then once they've raised their young, they'll eat your kale. They don't bother with the caterpillars anymore, right?
Dessert.
But so birds will eat caterpillars. But at that time, then the yellow jackets come out. Well, yellow jackets eat a lot of caterpillars, believe it or not. So they have a good purpose, right? As much as we hate them, you know.
I think so.
If you don't want to rely on that, spray everything with BT, or remember what else I said you can do? Where did it go? Oh. Cover it with floating row cover so the moths can't lay their eggs in the first place. So you don't. This will also keep birds off of your stuff. Because if I put that across my lettuce, the birds don't even see the lettuce underneath that, you know. So I use that a lot in the spring when there's a lot of birds around and there's not many things for them to eat. They will go for your little seedlings. So I cover them with that, and it really helps. And sometimes, if your bed is on the ground, you can simply drape it over it and put some rocks to keep it in place. My beds look kind of like that, so I actually attach that. I have a wire frame over the bed, so then I put this thing over the wire frame and I attach it with clothespins. Just cheapo wooden clothespins. I use so many clothespins in my garden. They are so versatile for attaching all kinds of things, and they're easy to take off. You know, unlike what's the other stuff called? The zip ties. You could use zip ties, but then they're a pain in the butt to take off, and you've basically ruined a zip tie. Whereas clothespins, I can use them for 10 years, again and again. They're easy to take off. So, you know, one way to do that, right? It's a good idea to keep a magnifying glass. I kind of have that when I go in the garden, because a lot of times mites are the best example. You cannot see mites with the naked eye most of the time. So you look on the other side of the leaf and you think, no aphids, everything looks fine. Well, there's already 20 mites on there. You just can't see them without that. So take a preventative look at the underside of your plants on a regular basis, especially once you know hot, dry weather will create mite problem. So after you've had 2-3 weeks of hot, dry weather, check for mites, because you know they're going to be coming. It's just a matter of time. You know? So magnifying glass is a great tool. I was thinking of bringing the microscope, but I couldn't find it this morning in our office. We have a microscope. We could have looked at the aphids, but you get it. Aphids are kind of pear-shaped, and they have those 2 little pipes sticking out of their butt. You know what those are for? That's where the sugary juice comes out. It's like a teat that the ants are milking. So that's where that sugary juice comes out that the ants like. And aphids, I'm fascinated by some insects. Not that I like them, but they are so fascinating in their life cycle and all the things that they're capable of. Aphids, for instance, are parthenogenic. Do you know what that is? They don't need males to produce young. Aphids have live babies. They give birth to live females. They basically clone themselves. So one female aphid will clone herself all season long and just pump out more female clones of herself. Only once a year she'll produce male babies, and then those males will mate with other females just to mix up the genetics a bit. And so one generation is actually the result of mating, but all the other 100 generations are just clones of the mother.
That's interesting.
Crazy, huh?
Really interesting.
Yeah. So that's what aphids can do. So they're not just some dumb little, you know.
They also kill your plant.
And that is why they multiply so quickly, because they don't even need to find a mate. They just keep cloning themselves, you know, and fast. And it's not even laying eggs. There's a ready-made aphid coming out of that aphid, you know. So what happens is when you use a spray such as Safer soap, you never manage to kill 100% of the aphids, obviously. Because 5 to 10% will be in some crack where that soap doesn't get to. Because soap is what we call a contact insecticide. So there's contact insecticides and there's systemic insecticides. The difference is a contact insecticide is an insecticide that actually needs to make contact with the insect to kill it. So it needs to either cover the insect, like spray it right on the insect, or the insect needs to eat it for it to be effective. That would be a contact insecticide. Most of the time it's like you need to really hit the insect with it for it to die. Whereas a systemic insecticide, are we taking a break?
No, 5 minutes.
Okay. With a systemic insecticide goes into the plant juice, so that when that insect sucks on the plant, it will suck in the poisoned juice. That's a systemic insecticide. Most of the systemic insecticides are hardcore things we don't use in the garden. So most of the stuff we use are actually contact insecticides. So I forgot what I was going to say about that. It'll come to me again, right? Oh yeah, we're talking prevention. So besides attracting beneficial insects, how do you do that? It's one way of preventing infestations. You attract beneficial insects with sources of nectar, because these little parasitic wasps, they like to suck on some nectar. So you provide them with flowers that they like. And most of them like the flowers that are umbels. You know what umbels are? That are flowers that have kind of an umbrella shape, such as wild carrot, things like that. Angelica is in the, carrot family. So these little umbels, they are generally covered in these little parasitic wasps and beneficial insects. But there's a lot of flowers we commonly like to grow in gardens for that particular purpose. The Gaillardia is one of them, Cosmos is one of them, Calendula is one of them. So these are, and almost every flowering herb will attract beneficial insects and pollinators, which we also need in the garden, right? So it's a good idea to let some of your herbs flower. Marjoram, thyme, all these herbs, once they flower, they attract these beneficial insects. So let some of them flower to attract them, and plant some of these flowers around. Now this particular plant, it's also commonly called marigold, but it's not the original. The original marigold has the botanical name calendula. And calendula does not do the job that this marigold does. This marigold's botanical name is calendula. And what this plant does is secrete something, a substance out of its roots that will prevent nematodes from infesting your soil. Nematodes are little worms that eat the roots of your plants. Not all, there's beneficial nematodes and bad nematodes, but we usually have a lot of bad nematodes in our soil. So when you grow carrots or any other plant where we like the roots, it can be completely devastated by the nematodes in the soil. The reason why we plant these so-called marigolds, which is really a bad name because it's actually another plant. So I call them tagetes because that's the real botanical name. And these plants, you can tell by the smell, it's smelling the plant. There's a really strong kind of acrid smell. I actually like the smell, but a lot of people hate it. And that stuff that makes that smell also comes out of the roots. And those little worms called nematodes hate that. The only issue with that is most gardeners, they have read in some magazine that marigolds will kill all the bad bugs, right? Well, that's a complete fantasy, okay? This plant does not kill any bugs, okay? It prevents nematodes, specifically these little worms. And even that, it only does after it has grown in that soil for a season. So only after a season of growing that in that soil is there enough of that substance in the soil to keep the nematodes out. So don't kid yourself in thinking that just because you plant a marigold in that bed, you're not going to have any bug problems. That is a legend that has been passed around Facebook and everywhere for ages, and there's a grain of truth to it, but do you know what I'm saying? People pass around these myths that have a grain of truth to it, but unless you really know the story, then you think, well, it didn't work, right? I still got bugs. Well, because it wasn't supposed to do that from the get-go, So first of all, you have to grow it in your bed all the time. So it's been in there, already the last year it has to have been in there. So that soil is saturated with that substance already. Then it can do its job. And even then, it will not kill harlequin bugs or get rid of aphids. It is specific for a specific pest. So just keep that in mind. Which I still love it, and it's worth growing it just for that, but don't expect it to do everything for you, right? It won't. I think we're kind of getting toward the end of our time. Let's see if there's anything that I absolutely have to talk about that I haven't yet. Now, the good news is that you can call us, no matter what you forgot what I said or what I forgot to say. You got our number. You have the address of the IPM website, which I really encourage you to take a look at. That thing is like a bottomless pit as far as information. So browse it a little bit. Nowadays, a lot of farmers work a lot with biological insecticides. Things that are very targeted toward one specific pest. To give you an example, do you know what the worm in the apple is? It's the larva of the codling moth.
Oh yeah,
When you have a wormy apple,
yeah.
it's a moth larva that you find in there, and that moth larva goes toward the core of the apple to eat it. And there is a virus that is specifically killing this particular larva. And I'm blanking on the name of the virus right now, but there's a product that farmers have used for a while, orchardists I should say, to spray, their apple and pear crops to prevent that particular codling moth larvae from going to our apples with a virus. So this is what's called a biological insecticide. Homeowners can buy this product. They have, in the last 5 years made it in small amounts for homeowners, but it's prohibitively expensive. You pay like $39 for 2 ounces or something like that. And that's enough for 2 trees only, for one season for 2 trees. So I ended up not using it. I don't have to use it yet because my orchard is far enough away from every other orchard that I have not had any codling moth, which is a miracle. If I would be in Lakewood, I would have it, obviously. But because I'm in the Jerusalem Valley, nobody else grows apples and pears anywhere in my neighborhood. So I have not had codling moth, knock on wood. So I haven't had to use it. So that is a organically approved biological insecticide, and that's increasingly being used by a lot of farmers. These insecticides that are just specifically targeted for the one organism that they're trying to
Oh yeah,
get rid of.
that saved the organic pear farmers.
Yeah, oh, totally.
That one. Yeah.
That and mating disruption.
Oh, that's the one.
Pheromone mating disruption
one
is
I'm
actually
thinking
what
of.
most pear farmers use.
That's
for
the one I was
codling moth.
thinking of.
And
yeah.
that is, again, highly effective, but only effective in large areas. It's not effective in your orchard. If you use it in your orchard, it will actually attract more codling moth than it deters. And the way pheromone mating disruption works is there's these
the one I
black
heard of.
plastic, these brown plastic boxes that you've maybe seen in the orchards on top of a tree, and you only need one of them per half acre or acre. You don't need a lot. This box has a sprayer, and every dawn and dusk, when these moths are active, it sprays out the pheromone, the scent of the female moths. So the male moths go for that scent. So instead of going to the female moths and mating, they fly towards that box where the scent comes from. And they exhaust themselves trying to mate with a box, basically. So that means the mating never happens, eggs don't get laid, no moths.
That's
So this is a very
nice, yeah.
smart way to deal with it. But it's not something that works in a small space for just a couple of trees, unfortunately, but it works in a big... You need to have at least, I think, a square mile or so of trees for that to work. But it's a fantastic way to deal with it. So anyway, I think I'm gonna come to a close here. There's hundreds more little tidbits, you know what I mean? This is like an extensive subject that we could talk about for days.
Yes.
But you get the idea. I have all the main points on your handout.
Okay.
That's the overview. And then getting from the overview to the nitty-gritty detail, you go to that website. Here. I'm gonna... These are the only 2, I'm sorry, that I have left, but it's the address is on your sheet.
We can just share this one.
The address is on your handout sheet. So check out that website. It has an alphabetical list of well-known pests where you'll have like 4 to 8 pages of information on every pest. It goes from how to identify it, what the life cycle is, how you manage it, which products you could use. It goes into very, very, very detailed description of these things, more than we could ever talk about here. And again, if you have questions, call us at the Master Gardener's office. Okay?
Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Yes. Thank you very much for
Yeah, it was a
joining us,
pleasure.
and hope you learned lots. And we'll put the flyer at the end of the video. And got any questions? You have that
You
card.
got our number.
Yeah, I got the number. Thank you very much.